Okay, so welcome everyone to this afternoon's zine writing workshop presented by Twin Cities Zine Fest and Hennepin County Library, also funded by the Friends of the Hennepin County Library. Before I hand things over to Nicole, I just wanted to ask you if you could please keep your mics muted for the most part so everyone can hear what's going on. The chat is really the best way to share. If it's totally not good for you though, unmute and just you can speak up, no problem at all. But I'll be monitoring the chat, and we're gonna jump right in because Nicole has plenty planned. So Nicole, all yours.
Thank you. Yeah, I was telling Russ, I tend to over prepare, so I have a lot to go through today, and I can speed up and slow down. There are about 6 attendees right now, so I think we have a good amount to be able to still talk to each other and make some room for that before. So what I wanted to kind of gauge maybe before I get started is how many people are kind of new to zine writing. This is, yeah, your first, or you have, maybe you can just put it in the chat, raise your hand. It's good, good. Kit says it's going good. And, okay. And is it co-op?
Cow wheat, like a cow eating wheat.
Thank you for that. Mm-hmm. Okay, and so you're new to zine writing. And okay, so perfect, Kit, thank you. So what we're going to focus on, since we have kind of new people and an experienced person who's made a few zines, is kind of a range of ways to approach writing your zine. I am a local Twin Cities writer and editor. I teach writing at the University of Minnesota. I am currently working on my own zine, my own book. And yeah, so these are writing practices that I think can apply to any writing situation, but mainly we want to kind of focus on, in particular, reaching our audience with our best writing possible when we have multiple modes. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to go through a PowerPoint, and we're going to also look at a couple of local Twin Cities zine artists and their zines, and we're going to look at them for pretty specific reasons. But right now, I kind of just want to walk you through a couple of things. Here is the actual zine workshop, what we hope to accomplish today. So while I'm kind of just reiterating what we're going to do, maybe if you can get a piece of paper and a pen or your tablet, however you like to write, because I do have several writing activities we're going to have to do to get into thinking about our zine writing. So today we're just going to talk about how sometimes the form of zines can co-opt our text or bury our text, or kind of take away what we thought we were doing with our text in it. So we're going to take time to look at various textual components that make up a zine and explore and discuss writing in a few different zines from the 2 local artists. So I want you to expect to build upon your writing skills and generate new writing that engages your audience. So we're going to really talk about how we engage audience in zine writing. I think the ultimate goal, I have a quote here from Heidi Estrom: writing is often defined by what it is, a text or a product. Less visible is what it can do, which is generate new thinking. And I think, to me, this is why a lot of us make zines. We have a passion for a certain category of life or hobby or whatever it is that we want to make a comment on, and we put it out there to provoke thinking and to generate new thinking. So all art has to make a statement, and zines offer us a DIY approach that makes both creating and publishing your work accessible on any level. But how you engage language in your zine might feel difficult at times and bring up feelings about yourself as a writer, especially if you're starting out in zine writing. So I'm hoping that today I can give you a couple of ways to overcome those barriers that sometimes we kind of set up for ourselves, not intentionally, but subconsciously. So contrary to what you may believe about yourself, linguistic elements of zines can be born out of the work in both concrete and surprising ways. So what this depends on lives within your process and your intent. So let's take a look at maybe what is getting in the way, or where you're starting from when you want to begin writing your zine. So what I want you to do is just for a couple minutes, think about your main issue with developing text for your zine. And it might not be like a problematic issue, but something that you might find hard, or something that is going too well that it kind of co-ops all your time. Maybe you end up writing too much. And then just like kind of identify some barriers that might be getting in your way. And then if you can just share in the chat, since there are just a few of us, we can share out loud, but Russ is going to share what comes through in the chat. So just take a couple minutes to write on those ideas and then share in the chat. Maybe just one more minute to wrap up those thoughts. Okay, so I wanted to stop showing that slide and kind of visit the chat and see, since there are a smaller number of us, we can talk. Aside from overthinking perfection and being new to comic making, again, I spend a lot of time with script and formatting the page more than actual drawing. Yep. Perfect vision. Yep. I don't take the time to pre-write my zine before the hard copy. I think that's a common one. Barriers or procrastination, being afraid that others will mock my ideas. Okay. And again, I'm trying to let go. Yep. So what I wrote down was my text becomes all consuming. As a writer, I focus on text first, and then all the images have to then serve the text. And that's really difficult and slows down, I think, my process. Crow, I start a lot of ideas and never finish most of them. Yes, so many stories of mine have gone unwritten as well. Okay. So we have this idea of perfection, too many ideas at once. We don't take time to pre-write. We kind of go ahead and start creating the zine, and then we procrastinate too. And I think at various points, we probably are all doing one version of these things or the other. which is the life, I think, of a writer. So let me get back into this slideshow and talk about how we can kind of rein ourselves in. Okay, so zines are multimodal texts. So all texts are actually multimodal. It's hard to find a monomodal text these days, but depending on your writing process, it can be difficult to get started when working with multiple modes of meaning. We saw that come up in the chat. Giving time to brainstorming and laying out your entire text is vital. And I think that's the first thing to say today, because then we can see how the elements will come together to create the meaning you wish to convey. So when we think about a multimodal text, there's typically 5 modes of meaning that come together to create a text. And not all texts contain all 5, obviously. Zines normally focus on linguistic, visual, and spatial elements, but linguistic, and you'll hear me say that, is really the word choice. This is our text and how we structure it and organize written and spoken language. Visual, obvious, color, form, shape, lines, texture, and in both still and moving. Audio, I think when we have some digital zines, more audio is kind of coming in. Every now and then you come across one that does have a little bit of audio overlaid. Spatial, obviously, is something we give a lot of time and thought to in zine making: proximity, direction, layout, and organization of objects. And then gestural, this one's less seen in a zine, obviously, the actual movement and speed and stillness of a person's facial expressions or body language. I do have a zine example today that kind of, it is a really great visual example of a gestural moment, and I'll point that out later. So then, yeah, we come upon these complications, but we have some considerations to make. So we have all those ideas, concepts, and themes that we've already begun sketching out. So we want to take some time to then consider how our approach may affect our writing and how we can make those changes. So we have, some questions. Does the design you've laid out allow for written text to be easily incorporated? So if you are an artist that likes to begin with the zine, the actual visual elements, are you allowing the written text its due? Are you beginning with written text and adding design elements that work in favor of the words? That's where I live too much. Or are you developing all the elements alongside each other, which seems like maybe the optimal, but I would say not always. We all have our different processes and ways of going about things. But are there other linguistic contributions overshadowing or enhancing your own words? How are you incorporating other people's texts? And how much of your own written text do you want actually in the relation to the whole text? So when we think about our ideas, we get excited and we want to start creating the zine. But that can often work against us, right? So we see kind of these places where we might take some time to consider our other options about how we might go about developing our zine. And so the first thing we want to do is think about what is our actual writing process. So I think when we think about writing process, this is kind of what we think about is, we have this pre-writing, but then we have the writing, and then we have the revising stage. But in actuality, it's a lot more cyclical, right? So we need to allow room for ourselves to work in any stage of the writing process. So we see that pre-writing is actually linked to drafting and writing our drafts out, which is linked to revising. Maybe we get some feedback or we proofread our own text, but then we get some feedback and something's not coming across like in the way that we meant it to. So then we're like, well, now I have to go back to that pre-writing stage. So just kind of allowing ourselves to feel not constrained by what the idea of a linear writing process imposes on us as writers, and to give ourselves flexibility to move around in our own writing process, and to also determine maybe what we need to work into our process. So let's take another couple of minutes to just take a moment to think about your own approach. How do you approach writing zines? What do you give more time to in the beginning? And then what is your writing process? Does it look more linear? Have you thought about your writing process? Because we all have one, even if we've never thought about it. If it is very linear, what stage might you give more time to and work in to make it more of that cyclical, reciprocal kind of going around in a circle back and forth types of process? So how do you get started? And then what places do you find inspiration? Where do you get stuck in your process? And what step could you add or add more of to round out your process? So thinking about what your process is now, what you might add to it to move it forward a little bit, to loosen it up, and just also thinking about like, how do you get started and what places you find inspiration. So just a couple minutes on writing that out, and then you can share that in the chat as well. Stop my share. Crow, I will do that moving forward. For this one right now, just kind of what is your writing process? What do you want to add into it to make it more flexible and reciprocal? And do you begin your zine writing? How do you approach beginning? Do you favor text? Do you favor the visual, the spatial design, or kind of all the elements together at once? Yes. Okay, so in the chat, we have ideas coming through. Kit talks about how the writing process is really random, writing down whatever idea they get and having kind of lots of spontaneous bursts of ideas. That's awesome. Inspiration is the best. And keeping track of all of those ideas is key, right, to remembering what we want to do. Kit wants to give more attention to the text. Cindy gives more time to visuals, kind of gets inspired from how their own cover, how they want that to look, how we come up with an idea, make a script, draw out the comic, ink it, finish and share, inspired by real life, but could give more time, especially to drawing. Yeah. Okay. So I think when we talk about writing process, the key to kind of getting, let's see, this slideshow went forward without me. So this. Okay. Sorry, my slideshow was having a little difficulty and moved on without me to get it back to where we were. Okay. So now, the thing that we want to think about is kind of what's going on when we have the whole zine then working together. And since our work is always in conversation with others, this is what we call the rhetorical situation. It helps us kind of solidify in our minds what we're actually doing. When we have all those great ideas and we have so many coming at us at once and we want to draw all of them out, the idea sometimes can take over to the point of, I think somebody said, I have lots of ideas, but I never finish them. So what kind of what can we do to our process to slow ourselves down and actually get us to work through one in its entirety? And starting with the rhetorical situation is always a nice idea. So there are 5 elements. You're the author. You have an audience, right? And we're going to figure out our audiences. And then your medium, the actual form of your communication. But then there's that purpose and then the context. So we see like the 3 points, the audience, the author, the medium, all, have the purpose, connecting all 3 of them, but all of that lives within the context of the communication. So the time and place, the culture, the environment where you're putting it out in. And so when we talk about rhetorical situation, it's the idea that all writing is contextual. We have moments of putting a message out there that if it falls flat, it's mostly because it maybe wasn't put out at the right time or it's not reaching the right audience in the place that you've put it out in. So when we sit down and have these great ideas and think about, well, how am I going to finish this? Kind of working through these ideas on your own can help you solidify actually what you're going to do and help us kind of keep going. So I want you to think about, take one of your great ideas and start running it through kind of these questions. So asking yourself some questions about the rhetorical nature of your idea. You're the author. Are you going to collaborate with anyone else? Are there sources of information that you're going to use with that idea or that you need to find? So you have a great idea. You want to get started. How is it that you get started? Do you call up your friend and collaborate with them? Do you find more information or do you pull information you already have? Then figure out who your audience is. Who are you going to put this out to? Who are you talking to when you're crafting this zine? And then what do you want your audience to take away from your zine as a whole? Like, what do you want to communicate with this great idea? And just kind of try briefly outlining how your written text might get them there. Like, I want to show people how to knit the perfect winter hat from Minnesota. Like, we can clearly see the how-to there, the steps that we might take them through. And that's kind of a simple example, but what do you need to say first about your idea? And then how do you want to communicate this idea, thinking about what kind of zine you want to make? And then zine slide got away from me. So then think about, the time, place, and culture environment that you're going to put this out into. And how might that affect your message? So if you're like, I just have this really great idea, I don't know if anybody's going to listen to it or like it, I love it, I'm going to do it. and then figure out the best place to put that out into so that your message is out there and people receive your message and your art. And then what do you have to say about the topic that creates new knowledge about it or provides a new way for your audience to look at it? So kind of taking this idea that you have and grounding it more into all of those rhetorical elements that will help you bring it all together and understand your own intent with that idea so that your success rate to completing it goes up, right? So let's take a couple minutes to just jot down ideas on this. You might have an idea in mind already. If you don't, you might think of one or kind of maybe sketch out an example for yourself. And these slides can be provided to you after this session.
Hey, Nicole, this is Russ. Could you try sharing your screen again? I don't think we're seeing it at the moment. So
Sure. Yeah. And I can put those questions also in the chat. Let me copy them. I think that's what happened. I was going to copy them and they got away from me. Okay. So here is the share. I don't think I'm going to be able to do the copy paste into the chat without it causing some trouble. I'm sorry, Crow. or whoever, I'm sorry, I think it was Crow that requested that. Okay, so we're back here. And these are the questions, and I will leave them up. Can you see that now? No? Okay.
I don't see him yet, no.
Let's try it again.
Ah, there they are. They're back.
Perfect, great.
Thank you.
So these are the questions. I will leave them up until we're done. Just a couple of minutes to jot this all down. Let's give it another minute to kind of jot down ideas about each of these elements. So this was the, sorry, let me go back. This was the slide that I think probably wasn't being seen as I was talking about it. But again, these slides can be provided to you after the workshop, so you can take a look at that. So moving forward, thinking about our audience, what we often want to do is write for ourselves, create for ourselves. We have a fabulous idea. But when we know who we're actually creating for, even if it's just an idea for ourselves that we want to work out, we want to give it to the world in some way and share it. So just thinking about who might be our audience often helps us kind of shape our text when we're having trouble with it, or when we've drawn ourselves into a corner and are kind of having trouble working that text in. And what we want to think of when we think of our audience is called discourse communities. So these are communities that are groups of people that share common goals and have definite ways of communicating with each other, internally and externally to the world, and communities of any size. So zine makers, Twin Cities residents, gardeners, schools, clubs, church communities, things like that. So they have preferred genres right now. We are talking about zines, and that all requires an understanding of that community's terminology or jargon. You'll know what I mean when I say matrix or folds, right? So members in a discourse community all have a certain level of expertise as well. In this meeting, we have newbies and we have people that have created zines, several zines already. So believe it or not, if you know, the more you've done this, the more expert you are, whether you feel like you are or not. But discourse communities also frequently overlap. So you can kind of be hitting up a couple of communities in your audience at a time. So just thinking about, okay, what is my community? Who is my audience? So just again, take a couple of minutes just to jot these things down. So what discourse community are you seeking to engage with your zine? Is it artists that other zine makers? Is it people who want to garden, to knit, right? Just some simple examples. But, you know, as targeted as possible. And then thinking about, you know, what other communities might overlap with that very small targeted audience that you've thought about. There might be other people that are interested in your message. And then thinking about what language or terminology or jargon you will use in your text. And so this is the important part to reaching our audience, actually communicating in a way that they understand with the message that they're going to get right away. So if you use, you know, we all know TC stands for Twin Cities, but people outside of Minnesota might not automatically realize that. So we have kind of that inside language with which we communicate. So thinking about those terms, and I'll give you a couple more minutes to do that. And then we're going to jump to looking at some examples. Okay, maybe wrapping up what you're jotting down. And as you're wrapping that up, I wanted to go over, let's see, my slides went forward. There we go. Okay, wrapping up that writing activity and looking at what our composing goals are. So here's a quote from Charles Basserman. He's a writing studies person, again, like Heidi Estrom. So while writers can confirm that the written words feel consistent with their state of mind, readers can never read the writer's mind to confirm they fully share that state of mind. So readers share only the words to which each separately attributes meanings. Thus, meanings do not reside fully in the words of the text nor in the unarticulated minds, but only in the dynamic relation of writer, reader, and text. For readers, the words of a text index or point to accessible ideas, thoughts, and experiences through which they can reconstruct meanings based on what they already know. So this is kind of what we're always trying to do, right? When we reach out to our audience, we're trying to connect with them with words that they already know, which is why it's important to understand the shared language of each community that we are creating our art for. So again, what this means for us, zines are our passion projects, so we approach them quickly. There's always kind of that spark and spontaneity involved in this, I think, for me at least, this art form. And so we can share that passion though, and effectively. And it's in our text too. When we make linguistic connections between the community we seek to reach and our own text, we create a pathway to share that meaning for our audience and for them to take away from in their own ways. So let's look at the first set that I wanted to share with you is from Maria Jose Castillo, Words Are Objects. And I'm going to actually share a different way here. And again, trying to get that share going.
Oh, we could see your screen. That it
You
was
could see
working.
that?
Yeah,
it
we
was
could.
working?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So
It's
the
back.
first, awesome, thank you. So the first Aether set number 0 that I'm going to show you, this is Maria Jose's comment on this set, and I'll just read it. With a collection of reflections, poetry, and graphics, I've produced the first installment of a serial publication titled Aether, driven to challenge my understanding or lack thereof of ethereal concepts and the words that illustrate them that we may find hard to decode. I examine the concepts of dichotomy, decision-making, clarity, and obfuscation, fate, and chance as drivers of co-authors of our personal story. With those in mind, I embarked on a research of readings such as the I Ching, Lucretius's De Rerum Natura, and I'm going to pronounce everything wrong, Leibniz's earlier developments of the binary numeral system. The Aether set number 0 consists of Riso printed poetry reflective zine. So the reason why I wanted to address and show and share with you what Maria Jose talks about in their creation process was that the words were actually something that they were trying to discover for themselves. So when we go back to now the actual set, I want to show you what this looks like. And share the Yes, No book. So this is the cover of that zine. And what I appreciate most about this work is the setup of text into the design elements. It is very strong here. I think this page for me is a masterful example of how text and design work together to create the meaning, right? So we get the idea of the ethereal here. We understand the idea of the yin and the yang, which is, you know, the artist has said was part of this development process. So really looking at how the design of the text along with the visual elements are, you know, putting forth this idea of what words and the ethereal represent. And I'll just scroll through this briefly. And if anybody would like to make a comment, unmute and ask a question about this, or here we have all just the single words. This is a text that wants to focus on the representation of each word and what it can convey. And then some of the longer text, the concepts of good, bad, legal, illegal, correct, incorrect, are like big borderlines traced all over that roadmap as we find ourselves navigating the codes and the do's and don'ts, that seemingly black and white spaces and the murky gray areas. Then we wonder why we feel lost. So we kind of see that there's no one pathway in this design. We can get lost in the words pretty easily. And we see that representation of the binary, right? The 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1. And just everything in the design is working to convey the concept that the artist meant to. And I think it does really beautifully in this collection. And again, just using text as design elements. And then what I appreciate most is also remembering to give credit at the end of bibliography. And final yin yang symbol. Does anybody have any thoughts or ideas that they wanted to share about the yes no text?
I really like the. I was saying in the chat. I really like the zine's use of the blue and gold color scheme. Like before, and still now, a lot of times I was afraid of just. I would often make my zines in like black and white because I still well, I'm still new at it, but I'm also trying to find. Don't really have access to a color printer. We're trying to find a way how to do that with color printers and stuff. But I really, I don't know, I really admire just the way, like, just its use of it.
Yeah, I do too. I think, again, I go back to this screen. I love this page the most. And I think just the gradient nature of the colors as well. And just kind of the use of the swirl on the text, going through kind of in the same, like, it almost looks like it's purple at one point, changing to black, right, as it goes over the gold. But yeah, the use of color in this zine really represents that ethereal feel too. Like, I can't see the chat while I'm presenting, so if there's any other comments in the chat about this one before I move on. No. Okay, I wanted to then kind of look at a few others. I will come back to this artist if we have time. Their newest zine, I think, is really exceptional to look at as well. This is Jacob Yates, a local zine artist as well, who has shared a few zines with me that we can look at. And this one's quite long. I'm going to try to quickly scroll up. If you could see that first page, it is A Dark Blue History is the title of this piece. And this is done in that gray, black and white grayscale. I think it conceptually represents the feel, I think, of the text well. We have the dark moments. So we have A Dark Blue History in support of MPD's 150s exhibit, Making It Real, Our History of Police and Our Future Without Them. So a local, obviously we have the nice graphic of the Twin City, well, Minneapolis here. And then again, just A Dark Blue History. So when we look at this one, and I'm going to try to make it so that we are seeing one page at a time. That didn't change much. We see this is actually a very text heavy zine. And then the pictures, the visuals are also large, right? And the text serves the image here. And there's a lot of quotes. So collaboration, this was made in a partnership as well, and takes a lot of text from others to convey the message. So another way of putting text together, right? We actually kind of do that clipping of the text and collaging it here. And then the larger image page. So you get the feel then of this text and the imagery are equally as strong. The text is definitely the element that is driving understanding of the images. However, the images also tell an obvious story, but through the imagery, we kind of understand the feel. We don't have to necessarily read the text to really understand what's going on here, but the text then elucidates, like, for us, what is actually happening and throughout the history of the MPD. And it really does go into the history of Minneapolis. I believe this was created in 2017. And we see what I like about this right here, you know, just kind of this element here of listing the different pieces of equipment the police department have at their disposal, highlighting those on their own, placing the importance of us noticing, right, those different guns and gear that the police force have. So I like how that text is isolated for its importance. So that is definitely a technique to look at. I'm going to move forward into the next example. If there are any comments on these, we can chat about that in a few moments, and we can always go back and look at them. I love the inclusion then of the cell phone capturing. And this is a point at which, you know, we're talking about the visual here, but the visual communicating very clearly the change in our society to being able to capture things on cell phones now. And then we get to the bibliography at the end. You can see the information that this artist pulled and used is extensive. So again, thinking about what sources of information we're using for our text, what we need to go find, and what we versus what we have or what we want to say ourselves. The next one I think is a good, same artist, I think is a good example of kind of a more streamlined text and image together, not the same feel, right? Margaret Yap and Jacob Yates in collaboration, a zine called Iowa Pigs. And this looks at literally the number of counties and pigs and population of Iowa and what that kind of represents in terms of the agricultural industry, the environment, and then turns to look at the governor's response towards health, human health in Iowa. So the representation of just the facts, right? We just have these simple facts and the drawings. And I think this is one of those moments when the simple facts relay the story, the information well enough for us to get the idea. We don't have to fill in the blanks or read between the lines. It's very clear. I love the image here of what looks to me like the places in which pigs are kept, and then the place where their waste is kept. So the circles, the little ovals here. And then going through, thinking about the links between the Iowa pig farming industry, the governor, and the legislature and the environment, and kind of just exposing those connections. So definitely making a statement about the harm that the waste is doing to the upper Mississippi River and how that spreads. And just kind of again looking at the different ways in which the governor of Iowa has used different elements to her advantage. And then again, an extensive source list, which you may or may not have when you're creating your zine. It could be just completely your own zine, no collaborators, and just your own thoughts and ideas, much like the Yes No book and the first example we looked at. And then one final one from, again, Jacob Yates, Objects from the Museum of Human History. Again, we go back to kind of this dark element. The text and the imagery is heavy, which really flows with the content. It's based off this poem, Field Trip to the Museum of Human History, in which a future society, a future set of school children visits a museum that is actually a former prison. So looking at the different objects within the prison and what they represented at the time. So we see handcuffs, the nightstick, the badge. So again, making commentary and thinking about how our society approaches the prison industrial complex. This is a short zine. It has a pretty impactful message right away. There is a statement from the artist here on the second page. Well, the first page, not the cover. So, you know, Jacob explains here the inspiration for this scene came from this poem here, Field Trip to the Museum of Human History. So thinking again about what inspiration we draw from and what we can create out of that. Okay, I'm going to stop this share and briefly just talk about what we've seen and how that kind of makes us feel as we create our own zines. Definitely.
Nicole,
Yeah.
this is Russ. We did have a question in the chat
Yeah.
from Nancy, just about when does a zine become a book? She says the blue and gold book is beautiful, but looks expensive to produce.
Yeah.
And Kawit echoed that kind of question. So
Yeah. And I think that's, I mean, the thing about a zine is you can print it and publish it on your own, and you don't need anybody to do that for you. And that is how this book, how Maria Jose published that book and that zine. So definitely something that you can purchase through the artist directly. I'm not sure what that costs, but color is always going to make things more expensive. I want to take a moment to show you then some of the other work that the more current one that I said Maria Castillo also has. So if I share my PowerPoint, you'll see, and again, you'll see when we can share those slides with you. I have links to their websites where you can check out their other work, check out who they collaborated with. Definitely get some more information there. But I wanted to show you, and I'm not going to go to the screen show, so can you just bear with me on how the PowerPoint looks bare bones. And it's not going to let me do that. So I will go directly to the website myself and show you there. You can see from another work of theirs that they have very much kind of done their own printing. And again, it's kind of like when capitalism meets art, a friend said that yesterday when they experienced kind of that idea of like, well, where are you selling your zine? And is it not, where can I buy it? And it's only $5 off your website. And I'll thank my friend again for sharing her story and hope she's okay with me sharing it out. But just this idea that we can print and sell ourselves. Really, this is an edition of 50. So this is their latest Ineffable zine. It's a poetry zine. And you'll see like the nice, this is really amazing binding. I don't think this is probably that cheap either. Staples are what we might be more used to seeing. But again, this is very color heavy. So I think it's just kind of up to you and where you plan on like putting your zine out. If black and white, like Jacob's work right now represents, I think, more the message in black and white. We also see that a lot of Jacob's work is talking about police and policing. Typically black and white is this color of the police cars. So we think about color more so and what it's going to do for our message than anything. And then again, yeah, can we afford to print in color? Can we afford those nice binding edges? It's all what you can do. But the idea of a zine and versus a book, right? Zines are going to have completely different ways of publishing and getting your message out than a book, right? Of course, you can self-publish a book, but mostly people expect books to be very long. Zines typically are not, where they're much shorter. I don't know if that answers the question enough, but I think it's really in your intent. And yes, Kawit, I will share the PowerPoint with all the links. Definitely will be sent to you. Nancy, does that answer your question enough? It might be expensive to produce. I think it probably was. And yeah. Okay. Thank you. Any other thoughts on those zines? I think that we have some elements to consider always in thinking about what we're doing. Some final thoughts, just knowing who our audience is, knowing our own process, developing that. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing and doing this.
Yeah, I hope this was helpful. I teach writing, so I always focus actually on our writing process and thinking about what is going to help us in the end when we're struggling and we just have an idea that we want to get out so badly, but we kind of procrastinate or get lost in our own creation process. So just kind of to wrap up, and again, I'm not going to put it into the slideshow. But just develop your writing process specific to each of your projects, understanding like your medium, collaborators, your sources of information, and maybe it's all just you, and that's great. But then kind of knowing where you need to represent yourself in your own process and what kind of moments you need to spend more time on. That might be storyboarding, laying it all out ahead of time. Consider the modes, know your audience and their ways of speaking to each other, that lingo that you all share. Determine what your audience, like what you want them to get, your message and your intent. Maybe drafting up that artist statement like Maria Jose's. Providing multiple ways of meaning making. You have all those modes. And then just getting some feedback if you can from friends and peers. So those are just kind of like those final takeaways. I hope this was helpful. And I think we are almost out of time, but I'm happy to stick around and take another question or two if anybody has them. And I think, Russ, you're going to be able to share the PowerPoint with the participants. Is that right?
Yes, I will be able to send that out to everyone. So look out in your email inboxes. It'll be coming your way.
And then the links will link to those zines that I showed you and more from those artists. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us, everyone. And thank you so much, Nicole, for
Sure.
joining us today and presenting. It was wonderful.
Yeah. Oh, I hope so. Thank you.
All right, thanks so much, everyone. Like Nicole said, we're gonna, I'll send out the slides. I'll send out a brief survey about the program, and thanks so much for joining us. And if you want to revisit the program itself, keep your eyes open for the YouTube channel for the Hennepin County Library, and this will be posted through the end of this year. So thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Nicole.
Yeah.
Cindy, hello to you
Cindy,
too.
hi. How did that? I'm bummed that my screen. I was trying to copy paste those questions and put them in the chat, and it did not like me doing that.
No worries, no worries. Yeah, it was fine. It was good, and we could
Okay.
the PowerPoint showed up except for that one time very well. You could see the zine examples very well and clearly that you were sharing, so that was all good. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay, Cindy, I hope that addressed kind of some ways in which zine writers can get started and useful. Oh, and she left.
We lost her.
We lost her. That's okay. I don't even want to know, but I hope some feedback. I don't know if you do an evaluation, but if you do at all, or if you get any feedback when you email participants and can share, that'd be great. I always like to hear that. Okay.
I'll let you know. Awesome. I'll let you know. And would you mind sending me the PowerPoint and I'll share it out with folks? Cool.
Yeah, I will do that. I realized I didn't put my contact information on it, so I'm going to just revise that right now and then I'll send it to you.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you, Ross, for everything.
So much.
Take care.
Yep. Take care. Bye-bye.